Louisville, Kentucky, autumn 1986. The air already carried the scent of dried leaves and distant bonfires when 5 friends, all around 17 years old, gathered behind a garage. Mason, the group's leader, had a wild spark in his eyes. With him were Darren, quiet and skeptical, Chris, the prankster, Leo, the sensitive one who always read too much Stephen King, and finally Alex, the most logical, always questioning everything. "There's this trail near Gettysburg, the one nobody talks about," Mason whispered, unwrapping a worn-out map that smelled of mildew. "A friend of my cousin said he went there and saw something, but he never said what." That sentence was enough. They decided to take their bikes, pack some tents, and go camping for a weekend. The forest was hours away, hidden behind endless dirt roads. And something about the silence around it already felt wrong. They arrived at dusk. The trees were too tall, the shadows too thick. Even the birds seemed to avoid that place. But they laughed, set up camp, made jokes about ghosts. They didn't know the forest was listening. That night, the fire crackled strangely. The flames seemed to rise and fall without wind, as if breathing. Leo was the first to notice the sounds, low whispers that came from deeper within the woods, like distant voices arguing. Chris joked, "If we die here, I just want someone to find my Walkman." They all laughed, but Mason didn't. He stared into the darkness. Something moved between the trees. "Did you guys see that?" he asked. "See what?" Alex responded, uneasy. "A shadow. It was tall, watching us." They checked around. Nothing. But later that night, each of them had the same dream. A giant tree, full of eyes instead of leaves, whispering things none of them could understand. When they woke up, someone had carved strange symbols into one of the trees next to the camp. None of them had done it. And the worst part, they weren't in the same clearing anymore. Panic set in. The map no longer matched the place. The trail had disappeared. They walked in circles for hours, but the trees kept closing in more and more, as if the forest was shifting, alive, and didn't want to let them out. Chris was the first to vanish. One moment he was behind them, and the next, gone. No scream, no trace, just his backpack lying on the ground, wide open and still warm. They searched, yelled, cried. No answer. That night, they didn't sleep. The fire wouldn't stay lit. Cold air seemed to rise from the ground. Leo heard footsteps walking around the tent all night, even though no one was outside. At dawn, Mason found a rope hanging from a tree. On the branch, a piece of Chris's shirt. Below it, a shallow pit like an old, dried-up well. Inside, something moved. Josh, originally Leo, stood frozen for several minutes, staring into the open well. The others, shocked, didn't know whether to pull him back or just run. But run where? The trail they knew no longer existed, and everything around them seemed spinning. "We need to leave now," Ben, originally Mason, said, his voice trembling but firm. "This isn't just a cursed place. It's a trap." Suddenly, a scream echoed through the forest, so close it felt like it came right beside their ears. A female scream, sharp, desperate, and coming from every direction at once. The trees began to creak. One by one, the canopies bent as if looking down, and the carved symbols on the trunks began to glow with a pulsing red light, like reversed heartbeats. They ran, but the forest wouldn't let them. The branches moved on their own, trying to grab backpacks, arms, necks. The wind whispered their names, but the voices were distorted, as if underwater or from beyond. Sam tripped, rolled down a slope, and landed in a clearing they hadn't seen before. The others followed. In the center stood a dead tree, massive, with branches like twisted fingers. Beneath it, a rotten old cabin. The door was open, as if it had been waiting. Inside, the air was putrid. It smelled of ancient flesh, mold, and something metallic, like blood. On the floor, deep scratch marks, as if someone or something had been dragged. At the back of the cabin, a cold fireplace hid an opening. Inside, steep stairs led to a basement. "I saw this in my dream," Ben whispered. "This is where it begins and ends." They descended. In the basement, they found an altar made of bones. Above it, old carvings told a story. 5 people enter the forest. None return. But the most disturbing thing, the faces carved into the stones were theirs. Josh began to laugh, not nervously but strangely, as if someone else was using his body. Then he said, in a voice that wasn't his, "Only one of you leaves. The others watch." The flashlights flickered, and for a second they saw her, a woman, eyeless, skinned, wearing old clothes, floating behind Josh. And then the lights went out. The darkness lasted only seconds, but that was enough to change everything. When Ethan's flashlight flickered back on, Josh was gone. Where he stood, there was only a trail of blood and a broken human fingernail stuck between the floorboards. "He's messing with us, right?" Sam mumbled, nearly throwing up. But there were no laughs, no sign of Josh, only the sound of soft steps coming from the stairs, dragged steps, wet. "Turn off the light," Ben whispered. They froze. The darkness returned. Upstairs, the cabin door slammed shut. A deep, slow breathing filled the basement, as if something huge stood there, something that didn't need to see to hunt. Then, a whisper in their minds. "Only one will leave. The chosen one. The rest will feed." Lucas snapped. He ran up the stairs and vanished. Screams, a dry snap, then silence. A silence so deep it weighed on their chests. Ben, Sam, and Ethan stood paralyzed until they noticed the altar's stones had changed. The carved faces were different. One face was missing, and Lucas's had taken its place. Ben collapsed to his knees. "This forest is a living ritual. It changes, it devours. We're part of a cycle," he muttered. "Every generation, someone comes, and someone stays." Sam screamed, throwing his flashlight at the altar. The structure cracked, and the floor opened. From below, arms emerged, pale and long, pulling Ben down into the earth. Ethan tried to save him, but it was too late. Ben vanished, swallowed. Only Sam and Ethan remained. They ran from the cabin, lost again in the forest. Paths scrambled like a living maze. Trees screamed. The ground pulsed. Sam collapsed, exhausted, laughing. "There's no way out. She already chose. Just need to know who stays." Ethan reached a hilltop and finally saw the town in the distance. The road. The way out. But when he turned to call Sam, Sam was standing, but no longer alive. His eyes were pitch black, his mouth sewn shut with blood, and behind him, the eyeless woman, hands on his shoulders. Ethan ran, faster than ever before. The forest tried to hold him, but he broke through, falling onto the road, screaming, covered in blood and dirt. A car found him hours later. He survived, or so they thought, because weeks later in his home, Ethan dreamed every night of the eyeless woman, and in every mirror he looked into. Sam stood behind him, silent, smiling with his sewn mouth.